TruthSeekah and/or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and/or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah podcast.
Gargoyles! Psychics! Everything's ungodly! Dark savage!
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian!
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in dark-sided stuff!
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how's it going? I'm your host, TruthSeekah. This is the TruthSeekah podcast. Excited and delighted to be with you guys today. Got an awesome show, awesome discussion planned for you all, and very elated to be here. So, want to give a quick shout out to all the Patron supporters, people supporting my podcast and my music and my work. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. A couple new people just within the last day since we've been streaming, doing this. A bunch of new people are joining on. So give a quick shout out to a couple of these names here. Shout out to Kayla Parker, Noah, William Bray, and Elizabeth Vernier. Thank you guys for coming on and supporting the show, enabling me to do what I'm doing. And if you would like to support, please head over to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to a bunch of cool stuff. You get access to extra podcasts, my full discography of music. I just went through my catalog yesterday of trying to go through every song I've ever recorded, whether it be with bands that I was in and group albums and efforts that I did. Any song that I'm featured on that I have recorded. I went through that and finally looked at it. It was overwhelming. Started back around 2005, and it was almost 200 songs. Almost 200 songs. The majority of those songs are available by becoming a patron. You get access to that, my full discography, over like 200 songs almost. It's crazy. Been doing this for a while. You also get access to our Thursday night School of the Mystics classes, and we'll be doing that tonight. Tonight is Thursday if you're listening live. And so we'll be doing that tonight at 7 p.m. Central. Each and every Thursday, you get access to the School of the Mystics. It's the community aspect of what we're building here, just to let you know that you're not alone and there are other people out there like you who have similar questions and who have been through similar experiences. So join us each and every Thursday night for the School of the Mystics. You get access to that too by contributing as little as $1 a month. So just saying that you believe in what we're doing and coming on and supporting. So thank you everybody who's doing that. Patreon.com/TruthSeekah. Shout out to everybody holding us down right now in the chat room live as we're streaming this on YouTube. Adam Starseed Bay, Christy Folks, what's up guys? Careful Carpenter, shalom, shalom, peace guys. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on today's guest, and I'm pretty excited about this interview. This is a lady by the name of Marilyn Redmond, who has had quite, who has lived quite a life and into a lot of different things, into spirituality, maybe mysticism, dealt with religion, dealt with struggle and abuse and stuff. So we've been exploring some of the things about trauma and people going and having a rough childhood and a rough life early on, and it kind of sets them up and marks them for this life of spirituality and spiritual practice, and it births a hunger within them to bring light into the world because they've sensed the darkness. They've felt what it's like to be bullied, to be abused, to be addicted, and so they have this burning passion within them to bring light to the world. And I think that's your story. So Marilyn, welcome to the podcast. It's going to be a good conversation.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for asking me. This is a great honor. I'm really going to enjoy it.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, you've been around for a while. You've been doing this for a while now. Been doing this for 30 plus years, as far as in the circuits and stuff. And you spoke at some of the Edgar Casey events and things like that. So, I think you're, one of the pioneers to for people like myself, just kind of opening up the door. You've been doing this for a very long time, even when it was maybe taboo for a lot of people. Now it's widely accepted. It's the cool thing to do. Spirituality, yoga, and things like that's awesome. But, you've been doing this a long time. Just I guess we could start with, what were some of the early experiences for you that kind of got you into spirituality, that made you ask the bigger questions in life?
Well, I didn't plan to go in this route, but this is the route that I know today we've all written a script, and this was the script I had to live out. I was born into domestic violence and alcoholism and mental illness. And so my childhood was very dysfunctional and abusive in many ways. And because alcoholism ran in the family, I was set up for being addicted to prescription drugs. A doctor gave me prescriptions, and I got addicted, and I discovered in treatment that one pill and one drink is 6 times the effect. So, my life was going downhill fast at one point. At the end, it starts out when you're on a prescription or any drug. You have a honeymoon period where you think things are really terrific, and this is the answer, right?
Yeah.
And of course, it turns against you at some point. And so that was the turning point. I've been in hell. I know what that's about today. Separation from the love of the universe, as feels like hell. And so when I was in treatment, I was introduced to 12 steps. And I knew my body had told me I was dying. And I knew from the doctor's report, I was in a hospital setting for treatment, and he did an exam and said, you're in the last stages of alcoholism. To drink is to die. So I have not had any relapses or any problems with that. I've been able to stay sane, so to speak, through the last 33 years. This month I have 33 years of sobriety. And I have found through the 12 steps took me out of religion. The 12 steps encourage you to meditate, and my church preached against that. Mm-hmm. And said you aren't supposed to listen to that inner voice, and that's the voice of the devil. So that was a very big struggle for me. But I knew that this was the only way I was going to live, is if I followed the 12 steps, and that's what it said to do. And in those days, I was very obedient too, and I didn't ask questions. So if you told me to do it, I'd just say how high. I just jumped. And so I started meditating, and that brought me into where I am today. Things started unraveling and opening up to me, and the answers started coming of what I needed to do and how my experience could help others. And that's, of course, what I've been doing for the last 33 years, is helping others to see that there is another better way in life. You don't have to go down to the depths I did. My husband tried to kill me, and I was trying suicide. That's how bad it was. And that one night I knew I wouldn't get home alive. He tried to kill me several times. And my church, the prayers always came out of the hymnal. I didn't know how to do it from my heart in those days. I didn't even know that's what was happening, but spontaneously I just said, God, I really don't want to die. And within minutes he was off the road instead of driving like a maniac, because he was going to show me. He was in a rage. And things started to change from that point, and within a few days I was in treatment, got the answers to start to be on a spiritual path. And it took a while to understand the difference between religion and spirituality, because I'd been raised a very good Lutheran from the time I was 5 years old and baptized. So to make that switch was a challenge. But today, instead of listening to my head, I listen to my heart. And that's what I try to share.
That's awesome. Amazing story. It's funny you mentioned working the 12 steps and working the AA program. I've got some friends who have went through the program and it's helped them. And when you look at the history from Bill Wilson, he actually talks about getting a lot of those steps from LSD encounters. Have you done any research on that, where some of that stuff stemmed from?
Oh, I don't know about his adventures with that. I know that he went to a lot of lectures by Emmett Fox in New York. He was a great friend of Edgar Cayce, who I'm also in the lifetime member of the Edgar Cayce Association, which is very spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that he also was part of the Oxford group in Washington, D.C. It was where those were the first 6 steps, and then he expanded them. So from the Oxford group. So I know about his spiritual background, but I didn't know about that.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
I know he was into more than just alcohol and whatever. And I've also been in other 12 steps, but I needed everything you could give me. Al-Anon has helped me because I was raised in alcoholism, and Al-Anon's for the friends and families of alcoholics. And if somebody has a relative, a husband or wife, I do a lot of answers on Quora on the internet. And people will say, well, my dad, I can't get him to stop drinking or whatever. Well, if you have a dad or a spouse or what, a relative or a good friend, go to Al-Anon and you're going to find out the answers of how you can have a better life. And you don't change the other person, but you can come into a tolerance and an appreciation and gratitude for, the situations and see it from a better point of light. And that's what the 12 steps have taught me, is to look from my heart instead of the appearances.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes the difference.
Let me ask you this, because this was always a controversial thing, because we talk about coming out of the church. There's a lot of people listening who are coming out of the church. Well, they're not coming out of the church. They're realizing that they are the church. Let's put it that way, right?
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, they're coming out of formalized religion. So when we talk about AA, I remember friends of mine who they tried to, pray the addictions away from their kids. Their kids were struggling with drugs and alcohol and things like that. And they would, want to go to AA, but the parents and people in the church was like, no, don't go to AA because it's not of God. There's the only way you need to kick your addiction is go straight to God or go straight to Jesus. Don't go to AA because it's this formula and stuff. So there was always a lot of pushback from the religious community when it comes to the 12 steps in AA. They say you don't need 12 steps, you need 1 step. You need to hit your knees, find Christ, get delivered. And there was always something that kind of stood out to me with the 12 steps, was like they would always say that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. It's a disease and I'm always going to have this there. And the Christian mindset was like, okay, you can be delivered. You don't have to be an alcoholic anymore. You could be set free, and that can be gone. Where's the connection there for you when it comes like this is something that always plagues me, or this type of addiction that will always be there, versus I'm set free, I'm no longer tempted? Or is it always still there some ways? Because they, those people go on to say, I'm an alcoholic. Even, 20, 30 years later, they're still identifying with, if I take 1 sip, I'm done. I'm done for. I'm going in all the way.
Well, you've asked a very complicated question, but a very good question. What I had to understand was it is a dis-ease. If you're at dis-ease, it can grow into being a disease.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, alcoholism is, according to the American Medical Association, a disease, because it leads to insanity or death. And if you don't have an intervention, which can be done in the 12 steps. Now, the 12 steps are definitely your connection being regained in an appropriate way with God. They don't have any religious affiliation, so Jesus is not brought into it. You go straight into the love of God rather than a person. So you're looking to the love of the universe to heal you. And yes, healing for an alcoholic is no desire to drink, even though this disease is still going in your body. And that's the other part people don't understand sometimes. It's a disease of body and mind. So the genetic element for me was running in the family. So to pick up for me, I was just a sitting duck. To pick up a drink was to start the disease, initiating it and going on in my life because I was set up genetically. And so genetically, you can stop drinking and it doesn't change your being rational. See, a drug changes you from being rational.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a drugged person and you're not making good choices. So when you quit the drug and you have a clean mind and you can come from your heart with healthy choices that are good for you and those people around you, you can act in a loving way. And that's called recovery. And you allow the love of the universe to flow through you to those around you rather than your fear, anger, resentments, guilt, shame, all your negative energies. People in the Bible call those, Jesus said, Satan, get thee behind me. And that's what he was referring to, is our lower energy comes from our ego. And if that's running our life, it just does make your life hell. So the steps take you out of needing to be, and I'm fearless today. You don't have to have fear in your life. It's an illusion. And you don't have to have resentments. See, fear is the lack of faith. And in my church, they never talked about faith, So I substituted faith for fear. I found out that if you plug the toaster into the electric wall socket, you get electricity. So meditation and prayer plugs me into the electricity of God, so to speak. And I have that connection today, which I don't go through somebody else like some churches have you do to get to God. I go straight to God in my prayers and talking and communication. And so when you do that, you have to let go of anything in the way, and that's your ego. And that's what sends out the guilt, shame, and so forth. And the steps show you how to release that negative energy, the negative feelings, so that you could replace it with the love of grace of God. And when you're living in that space, you don't want to drink because you don't have to drink to feel good. You just are good. That's your experience is a good experience, and you don't drink to get it. You feel it naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So if I picked up a drink today, I might not drink alcoholically immediately, but it triggers the disease to reenact. And the disease actually never stops moving through your system. And if you it picks up where you left off. So for me, it would be to die, because that's what's left on my, so to speak, monitor. So people sometimes have a lot of relapses because they haven't reached that stage of alcoholism yet. But the only way that you're going to totally be free of this disease is, and I'm not going to test it, I'll tell you this, but if you become a Christed person, this is really what has happened for me in the 12 steps. I've discovered that you can literally replace all your negative energy with all the love and grace of God and be in that mature place of outgrowing the past energies and replacing it with the truth of the universe, which is love. And you become a Christed being. A Christed being just means you have moved into unconditional love without judgment, criticism, or condemnation. And you are now coming from true love for, love your neighbor as yourself. And so that's a Christed being. And we all can move into that. Are we willing to remove what we've been hanging on to, our old childish immaturity, and grow up? So when you grow up and become a mature person, you're Christed, and you don't need to drink because you're out there helping others. And the gratification of that is so strong and joyful. That's what I always wanted anyway, was to feel, I wanted some joy in my life. I wanted some peace of mind, and I have that today. And I don't have the feelings. So, and I can get a little down here and there, but, and I've been just the last 24 hours has been a real maze of difficulties, and I've been getting through it just fine. We handled it as rationally as we could and finally found some answers late last night to resolve it. It's an issue with this licensing of a car I stole. And the whole thing turned into a real jumble. to say the least. And the lady was so upset she was ready to sue, and we got that calmed down. But when you have a rational mind, you don't have to handle your problems so they become worse. And you can handle them so they resolve in a loving resolution.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I help people with my counseling. How can we look at this situation, reframe it so that you can see it from a bigger picture of this was part of a situation, and what were the lessons, and how can we resolve it in a loving way for you and the people around you. And we can move out of these old situations with spirituality. And most of the time, and I'm not trying to put any churches down, because everybody's where they're supposed to be in learning. And if that's where they are, when they're ready to leave, they'll leave the church. But, churches tell you, you're supposed to follow our tenets, but the tenets tend to be man-made rules rather than as principles of love. And that, to me, is the difference between a church and spirituality.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. So you're talking about being able to, you say, feel the love of the universe. A lot of times, whenever someone's addicted to substance, whether it be alcohol or drugs, there's a euphoria that comes with it. There's a place of escape. Like, I can leave my current situation, my family, my bills, whatever it is. I can leave the stress that I'm in, and go to this other world almost. Like, if I get high, if I get drunk enough, that stuff disappears. But we know with substance, it always comes back, and you never resolve it, but it's always there. So, but it takes us to another place. And I think that you're talking about feeling the love of the universe. I think that takes us to a euphoric place of oneness with God, and knowing that we're loved and we're cared for and everything's going to be okay. What was the first time that you felt that euphoria and knowing that everything's okay because I'm one with the Creator, I'm one with God, and I can feel the love of the universe all over my body and my mind, my heart, my understanding, feeling that love? What was the first time you felt that?
Well, that's an interesting question for me. I was told in spirit to make a trip to Australia to an AA convention. And I was just newly divorced. And in those days, I was emotionally 3 years old, scared spitless of being on my own. No family was supporting me in my recovery. And God says, well, this opportunity came to go to Australia. And I says, well, I don't have any money, and I don't have the time. And, I'm not about to go there all by myself. So guess what? There was a group of 15 people going in a travel group called Sober Travel, and I could join them, so I would be with like-minded people and people I could enjoy the trip with. So then I says, well, I still don't have any money. How am I I can't go. And I ended up in a car accident, and 5-car collision, like an accordion. And I watched the angels help everybody, so no one really got desperately hurt. It was the cars did, but the people didn't. And I came home and prayed, and I says, what's this about? And they said, well, we want you to take the insurance money from your car and take for the trip expenses to go to Australia. So I said, well, okay, I guess I'm going to Australia. So off I went, and part of the trip went to the Great Barrier Reef as part of the excursion. And when I was out at the Great Barrier Reef snorkeling, and I was enjoying the fish. We were lighting up like fluorescent fish when the sun hit them. The great big clams. This is in my first book. The great big clams opened up, and the coral was moving with the current of the underwater current and swaying, and all these different corals were gorgeous colors and shapes. It was absolutely gorgeous. And it was time to go back on the boat, and I didn't want to leave because it felt like heaven down there. I mean, it was marvelous. I'm swimming with the fish. It was terrific. And so I stood up to take my snorkel off, and it was like the heavens opened up and said, you do belong. You are part of this. And I just felt like I'm part of this whole picture. And from that point on, I never felt like I belonged. I'd never felt like I fit in anywhere, growing up in school and church or anything. And all of a sudden, God's telling me, you belong in this universe. You're part of us. And it was just such a tremendous message to me. I believe that's probably my first experience like similar to what you're explaining.
Feeling the love of God, feeling the love of the universe. Especially, I mean, that's so powerful, especially when people are part of these, religious organizations, these churches or whatever, where it's just all about, you're doing this wrong, you're not doing this right, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, and if you do, God's not going to accept you. If you do this, God's not going to love you. Marilyn, if you meditate, that's demonic. Stay away from this kind of stuff. There's a lot of us who have dealt with that. We've heard that, and the weird thing with a lot of people, especially like in the evangelical movements, is like we have an encounter with God. We have an encounter with the love of the universe, as you say, and then we go to church to try to recreate that or try to cultivate that relationship. Who is God? What happened to me? And we get plugged in, and we let go of the bondage of the world. Some people, kick alcoholism, drugs, or whatever. They put it down and they get in church and they pick up a whole nother set of burdens and a yoke that they can't carry. Religion puts like expectations on you that they don't, the people and leaders don't even put upon themselves, these different rules and things. And there's so much there when it comes to accepting yourself and knowing who God created you to be, and really the love of God. Some of them, not obviously not all churches are that way, but some of that stuff gets really culty and gets real. You feel bad when you leave church. Like you don't feel good about yourself or good about that God loves you no matter what you've done. There's an everlasting Father who cares for you. Some of those churches you leave and you feel like scum, like you feel, and you didn't even do nothing, but they make you feel like this weight and this burden. So you kind of have to go back to these leaders and stuff who can liberate you from that. And that's witchcraft. That's manipulation too.
That's mind control.
Mind
And
control.
we have been, our whole society has been mind controlled. In fact, that's what you just mentioned. What one of my big soapboxes is about medicine. They tell you what's wrong with you instead of what's right with you, and they just perpetuate the illness by that. So if you don't focus on what you focus on grows. So when you're told that you're, and I hope I don't offend people, but when you're told you're a sinner, that's shaming people, and you're making them feel less than. And so then you say, well, I have the answer. Well, it's all mind control, in my opinion. It was for me anyway. And I had to understand that God was created in the spirit of love, and I never was a bad person. In fact, in one of my meditations a few years ago, the message I received was the silent voices, I do listen to it now, said, Marilyn, there's nothing wrong with you, and there never was. You are a good person. And that was the most validating comment. My parents never said they loved me or I was a good person. It was always, if you aren't busy and productive, what's wrong with you? You aren't, you're not fitting in. You got to get the work done, and that's most important. And who you are doesn't count. And so the love of God is love is a validation. And churches that don't have that loving essence, it's kind of, sometimes they poke it in. It's like throwing a dog a bone. They'll throw in a nice little comment, and then the rest of it's still back to what's wrong with you. And so that's how they hook people. But that's how I got hooked into domestic violent marriage. It threw me a bone, and that was the nicest thing that ever happened to me at that point. So I bought it and stayed in there looking for more bones. And of course, things got worse and worse. So we've been deceived and as a school teacher, I was taught to love the child and not the behavior. And so I taught from that point of view. But most of the time, society says you're a bad person and this is what's wrong with you. And you can't have any self-esteem when that happens. And when you get self-esteem, and I've had to release all the negative energies to find the self-esteem inside, the love in my heart could finally safely open up and fill me and share it with others. And then I don't have to buy into what people tell me. I know today, as being a counselor, that when people talk, they're projecting their discomfort onto me. And I have enough self-esteem today. I can say, that's sad that they feel that way. That's not who I am anymore. And I don't have to buy their bullshit. I don't have to buy their comments just because they're making them. I can discern they're uncomfortable with their life, but I don't have to take it on.
That's exactly right. I mean, we've been discussing that. it's usually nothing to have to do with you at all. It's usually nothing with you. It's you represent something that they don't like about themselves.
Exactly.
You're too free. I'm not free. I can't be free. I'm in bondage, but she's free. Oh, well, look what she's not really free. She has this, she's got that, she's doing this wrong, she's doing this wrong. And people project because they're upset that you're walking in a freedom that they only can dream of at this point, you know? But that's why we're supposed to respond with compassion and respond with love and see that person restored. And we can do that. I think love wins at the end of the day. And it's not personal. Nothing's personal. And the Bible is beautiful. It says that our battle is not with flesh and blood, with powers and principalities and heavenly places. So it's not that person, you know, your enemy is not that person. Your enemy is what that person's been through, and they're still holding on to it. That's what we have to deal with, the trauma and the things, the pains, and you trigger that person because you're free and they're still bound because they've been told by a pastor or a family member that they'll never amount to anything, that they'll never be anything. And here you are fulfilling your dreams. Here you are walking in freedom, and you trigger that person.
It's freedom from the ego. Edging God out is the ego. And what I do a lot of research. One person called me a research journalist. I've got 10 books and on YouTube myself and blog and whatever. And what I've discovered is that the Bible was written 2,000 years ago for terms the people understood at the time. So today, I want to write a book about this one. I have a couple more books I want to write, my angel experiences and what the Bible really says. The Bible is really explaining your energy. And they used terms people understood 2,000 years ago. If you go back and check Tesla, he says, if you want to understand life, it's all about energy, vibration, and frequency. And that's what the Bible's describing is how can you change your energy into a higher frequency and feel the love of the universe, which is that higher loving vibration. Not doing in spiritually, you do it through the love of the universe rather than artificially through drugs. Because in my case, I got addicted to them. So was that the real way to get that experience? Not permanently and not in a real authentic way. It's a superficial way to feel high. And I can feel high I just sat the other day having dinner the other night because some really good things my birthday was last Sunday. And so we were celebrating and I just was having such a great time and I haven't had a drink for 33 years. I mean, I just felt so great inside. It just was just oozing. And so, that's the love. And people called it God because they didn't understand energy because it's invisible. And so they had to label it with material, three-dimensional terms. And they don't understand that that's what life is about, is that's what Jesus came to say, was the energy needed to shift. Satan, get thee behind me. That's what he's talking about. And of course, the churches have made a doctrine out of it and creeds and whatever, and then telling you this is how you do it and this is how you don't, and then telling you you're wrong if you don't and follow their way. But the point is, if I come from my heart, I'll always be right. And I'll always be connected with God. And I am a good person. And what people do around me makes me today look at myself and say, am I still sending that out? So that's what's coming back. And so that's what I have. It's not the church telling me to change. And then they don't really tell you how. The 12 steps tell you. When I used to sit in church and hear all this stuff from the pulpit, but it wasn't really how to do it. Just you need to do it, but they don't say that. My Paradigm Busters Reveal the Real You book tells you how, step by step, detail by detail. How do you get rid of the Satan or the lower, denser, negative guilt, shame, fear, jealousies, 7 deadly sins? How do you get rid of those and replace it with the love and grace of God? So when you do that, you've moved into a higher consciousness, and that becomes a Christ consciousness. And churches don't really tell you. They tell you can't become Christ because Jesus is the only one. That's not true. We're all Christed beings releasing our human defects. And when you address your own defect and say, God, humbly remove this and replace it with your love and grace, you move into a higher consciousness. And that's what we're all trying to do, is move into a higher consciousness of unconditional love. And that's what the 1,000 Years of Peace is about. and we won't have that negative energy demeaning us and criticizing us and telling us what's wrong, as you mentioned.
Going back to the addiction, you talked about early on that there was this you were pretty much already like a candidate when it comes to alcoholism, alcohol abuse, and things like that because of your genealogy and because of your genes.
Right.
Has that led you to study generational curses at all?
Okay, a curse is only a curse if you allow it to be a curse. But families buy into that and perpetuate it and drop that belief system down through the children. And the children learn from their parents, and the parents can't teach them what they don't know. So generationally, one day, literally, I stood in my family room and I literally felt the anger of my family from 6 generations go ploop, ploop, ploop onto my shoulders. I'm the one that's supposed to heal the anger of the family. What I found out about anger, and I teach a class every month about this, is if you're angry, you're a little 5-year-old throwing a temper tantrum because it didn't go your way. Somebody didn't do it the way you wanted them to do it, and it didn't do it the way you thought they should do it. Life ain't going the way you planned it. And so you're a little kid throwing a temper tantrum. And you know what? When I accept everything is falling together just like it needs to for where I need to be and what I need to learn, I don't have to be angry today. I don't have to be. My husband tried to kill me 6 times. When he died 2 years ago, I was in compassion because I had learned to pray for him, the woundedness he went through in his childhood, to play that part so I could learn to come out of it. You know, it really affects the people that we think are the worst enemies are our best teachers of how we can change into a better person. And they're there to show us that. Instead of us condemn them more and more, is to say, I thank in prayers, meditation, in an altered state, this works really well. You can't just say it in third dimension. You have to move into that's why I'm a hypnotist and do regression work. You do it in an altered state, that's now. See, otherwise you're not living in the now. So when you do it in that state, and I thanked him for playing that part. And all of a sudden, it was no longer an issue. I took responsibility for my part of what I'm learning to heal. We have to see that these people around us are teaching us to be better people. And I know today we all write scripts before we come in. And he came to me while he was still alive in spirit. He was living in another state. And he said, he says, I didn't want to play that part in your life, but nobody else was we come in soul groups, and nobody else was stepping up to do that. And he says, I loved you so much that I played, I was in domestic violence, strangled, rape, you name it, okay? And he was a sex addict, a psychopath, rageaholic, and alcoholic, of course. So that's how I met him. He made me his drinking buddy. So, we have to come to a bigger picture of what's really going on in the energies. And it's not the people. You said, don't take it personally. It's not the people. It's the situations that we're healing. And they are generational. And my family has for years and years had these mindsets of being victimized and mentally controlled and so forth. And I'm hopefully changing that in my family.
Amen. Good stuff. When you have these type of traumatic encounters, you're open up for spiritual experiences. We've been talking a lot lately about shadow beings and seeing those dark entities, those dark figures and stuff. People have had encounters with those. I know you've had a lot of encounters with angels, and I want to talk to you about that. Have you ever had any encounters with the paranormal and demons and things like that manifesting into this reality?
I have done several exorcisms, yes. And it's dark energy, attached to people. And to release it, it takes the love of as heavy an energy of love as the demon is to neutralize the energy, and for them to be willing to release that. One exorcism took over 3 hours because she kept inviting. She had such a poor boundaries that she just kept letting them come back in and come back in. Generally, it can take a couple hours then or less. Some have actually left sooner. And angels are the higher energy that God's, you might call them helpers, coming into. I mean, I've almost died 12 times, and angels have kept me alive and well. I've been off the cliff of the Grand Canyon. I went off the cliff at the between Banff and Jasper in Canada at those national parks. Almost went off the cliff and going to see my great grandson a few years back, and God pulled me out of my body. She put me over the cliff and said, "See, that you aren't going to be hurt. Your spirit won't be in your body. You won't go down with the car. So don't worry if that happened. You'll be, So angels have been there for me in so many situations. I see angels and I paint their portraits. If people are interested in their portraits being painted, they can contact me at Marilyn at angelicasgifts.com off my website, or I have a radio show, Love Never Fails, and I'm on the air every Tuesday afternoon on boldbravemedia.com, 6 o'clock Eastern time. And so I'm easily accessible. They can get me off of, just Google Marilyn Redmond, and a lot of my activities will show up. So, I do counseling off of Skype, if it's our phones. If you can't be living close, I'm going to have a new client just can drive, which is nice. So, if I've actually done readings, as far as a lady in Australia contacted me, and I did a reading, so out of the country even. So through PayPal, we can do these things today. Isn't that wonderful?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I know we're talking about angels, talking about demons, and without having to see them physically, we definitely can see the presence of the dark energy, of the demons and things like that.
Can I just make a comment? You can see them physically.
That's what I was going to ask you. Have you ever seen any?
I have had experiences with that, and this isn't a story I've told very often, but I was traveling to see my grandsons. I live in Western Washington, south of the airport from Seattle, and I was traveling over several mountains and heading towards Boise, Idaho for Thanksgiving. And when I got to the top of one of the passes, the snow was coming, and a trucker helped me get the chains on my car. And before I hit Pendleton in Oregon, I had a flat tire. These were not the typical chains. They were a new version they were experimenting with. And of course, one of the wires hit the tire and caused it to leak, okay? I made a hole in the tire. So here I am on this freeway. No houses, flat ground. It's where they have a big rodeo. It's, out in the wilds, you might say, without any town houses or whatever. And I'm sitting on the side of the road with a flat tire. No, this is before cell phones. There wouldn't have probably been cell phone contact where I was. It was half an hour north of Pendleton. And at those times on the news, there'd been some attacks of single women stranded on the freeway. And here I am stranded. But this little old truck comes putting down the highway. All of a sudden, I went into this peace because I was pretty anxious. What's going to happen to me sitting out here on this freeway without, no way to get anywhere else? And the man stopped. It was a little old gentleman, and he opened the window and he says, "Ma'am," he says, "do you need help?" And of course, I didn't know who he was from Adam, but I said, "Yes, I need help." So he says, his comment was, "I need a second job." He was a retired gentleman. So I can't help you all the way, but he says, "I can get you to Les Schwab," which is a local tire place on the West Coast. "I can get you to Les Schwab. They'll come out and fix your tire, and then you can get going again. You want me to take you into Les Schwab's?" Because my eyes perked up. Yeah, I'd love to be able to get help. So he took me into Pendleton. And the man at the shop said the whole room was filled with clients waiting to get their chains on and snow tires on because the snow was coming. And I told him, I says, "I got to get across the Blue Mountains before dark." I'd had a nightmare experience years earlier, and I didn't want to go through that one again. And so the man looked in the room. He says, "If you don't tell anybody in the room, I'm taking you next." I'm not in line, right? "I'm taking you next. And I'll get you back on the road." He says, "Don't tell anybody," but he says, "I'll help you." So they came out, got my car, fixed the tire, and got me on. And when I was still at the counter when I was talking to this gentleman, And I went to turn around to thank the man for helping me, and he was gone. I recognized later, that was probably my first experience seeing one as a physical being. And I went to thank him, and he was gone. My boyfriend has had numerous experiences where they've shown up in physical form. And I could tell you several of his stories. But yes, I have seen them. And I have actually felt at one point I was an angel in physical form for somebody that needed help one day. And I'm sitting there in my car, and she's talking to me about what she needed to say. And I'm waiting. Again, it was a tire problem. My tire went flat. I ended up in this lady's car waiting for the AAA to show up. And I'm sitting there saying, oh, I'm supposed to be here sitting and listening to her. She needed someone to talk to. Apparently, she'd been praying for someone to hear her story and what she needed to understand. And there I was. So it dawned on me, oh, I'm there for her. So we can be angels too.
Yep. That's what the word angel means, is messenger, someone who's carrying a message. And I think in the scriptures it calls Paul a messenger. But there's something, I mean, there is that they're not just messengers. Like they're otherworldly at times. You know what I'm saying? They're etheric light beings from another realm, and they're not just, because I think some people will try to say, well, you know, angels are just people. Angels are just people. They can be people, but they also can be etheric light beings as well. You know, something that carries a message, or a spirit that carries a message. Like this spirit is coming with a message, a feeling, a vibration. That's a message to change the way a group of people are feeling, a city of people are feeling. Like really, you know, it gets pretty deep. But to come and change it, it talks about in the Bible, it talks about like the spirit of confusion, or the spirit of joy, the spirit of slumber, spirit of deep sleep. And these spirits would go back and forth with God and say, hey, let me go down and be this type of spirit. And this other one, they would kind of petition God, wanting to go down there and change the vibration of the people. And those are angels.
Pardon me, but that's what my Paradigm Busters book is all about. We can change. We don't have to stay at the level we are right now. I created a diagram and a chart in my Paradigm Busters book, which is also in my newest book, Finding Reality Beyond Fear, as the stairs going up higher and higher into higher vibrations. And that's what the 12 steps teach us, is how to move up those stairs. And we don't stay at one level. We have the choice to let that energy go higher and higher in us, so we can be that Christed or higher consciousness person coming from the love, unconditional love of the universe. And so we aren't stuck in one place. We don't have to be, so to speak, sinners the rest of our lives. We get to be, that's what Jesus was on the cross and crucified to show we can rise above our ego. And that's when he became, you know, he didn't die. He came back and showed people, I'm still here. You know, people would, actually, he was around for a lot longer than the Bible said after the resurrection. We resurrect from our lower natures into this higher consciousness, and not that we're going to be, well, part of us is our whole consciousness. If you put it all together, part of us is a little bit of an angel, but we have to grow into it.
You talk about chakra energy and cord clearing. What's cord clearing and chakra energy?
Well, those are two really good questions. Chakras are the energy sources. There's 7 basic chakras. There's lots more. My boyfriend does pranic healing, and he's familiar with all of them. But there's the root chakra, the solar, the navel chakra, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the crown chakra, and then the third eye. And those are the energy interfacings with God's energy from the universe. And you have to clean out those chakras so they function and bring in. I have a chart about this in Paradigm Busters too, and I teach it every month in my class. You have to clean out those chakras so the love of God, or that energy from the universe, can come in and actually integrate into your physical body. That's your health. And if you're toned off from that energy of love integrating in your system, you're going to get sick. That's what the sickness is about, is they aren't functioning. And you've got to get them opened up so they can allow all the energy in, and you can then be as healthy as you can allow that energy to interface with your whole body. Cord clearing is really important, and that has a lot to do with being codependent. We take on all this energy of everything around us, especially people. If you're, in my case, a woman who was totally clueless, and I latched onto my husband as a barnacle because I'm 3 years old. Well, it turned out he was probably 3 years old from his abuse. And the two of us are trying to be two children trying to be one person.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to learn to grow up and disconnect from, that's what Al-Anon's about. You detach, you stop the corded connection to another person for your survival and your self-esteem and being okay, because if they're okay, you're okay. You know, that's all this codependent stuff. And there is a 12-step program called CODA that helps you with this too. And you release those cords so that you finally can be your own individual self. And instead of being two people hooked together at the hip, there used to be a book called The Bobbsey Twins, and that was my husband and me. We were hooked at the hip. Today, I have a boyfriend, but he's a whole individual. I'm a whole mature person. And we come together as partners rather than clinging like a barnacle onto somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And we each have our own lives, and then we share, but it's not at somebody else's expense. I call it win-win in my counseling. How can you work this out so you both get what your needs are met? And if you meet your own needs, see, you don't need to be a barnacle to somebody else, and those cords can be released, and you can turn into a mature person. And you are no longer that little kid hanging on to an adult trying to make it, or another person not any older than you are trying to make it in life. You can grow up when you do your cord clearing.
Talking about growing up, talking about being stuck, it's very interesting. You talk about being 3 years old, and that may seem kind of far out for some people, but there's a lot of study out there that shows that you're kind of stuck at that age where the trauma happened to you, where something bad happened to you. And it's talking about a lot of experts who study this. They've said Donald Trump seems to be stuck, at a young age as well from some trauma, and still having something to prove that he, can get something done, or he can be somebody, or whatever the case is. He's an overachiever almost, and being stuck at that early age. So it kind of like never have actually grown up so that they can ascend to the higher levels of consciousness.
Well, I was an overachiever. I was valedictorian, trying to get my parents to give me some validation and say, well, we're proud of you. I just kept getting A's, thinking, well, one of these days they're going to notice I do really well. And I became valedictorian, not because I'm the smartest kid in the class. I studied the hardest because I was trying to get recognition. And they weren't recognizing themselves because they never grew up, so they couldn't give it to me. And so I've learned God recognizes and validates me today. I had a beautiful validation last night at a meeting. And, this man stayed to say, what you said. He says, I'm going to keep it in my heart forever. He was very impressed. So today, I don't look to people for my validation, but it comes because I have something to share, and they recognize that. And I'm very grateful that people are listening and hearing that there's better ways to live our lives today.
Awesome. Go ahead and talk a little bit about your newest book, Finding Reality Beyond Fear.
Well, I'm very proud of it. It's actually my story growing through the stages. The universe has laws, the universal laws, and they are laws of love. Now, when people read the Bible and they say the Lord, they're really talking about the law of love. It's not really a person. And so the 12 steps, that's what we were talking about last night, is the law, principles of love. And when you're following those principles, your life improves because you're now focusing on what works instead of what doesn't work. So my book is divided into 4 sections: finding grace, and what we've been talking about is releasing what doesn't work, on how I did that. And the second part is finding balance, and there's different little slogans, we call them, to help you find a balance in your life. When you've gotten some self-esteem and you feel good about yourself, then there's little sayings like keep it simple, easy does it, This too shall pass. When you have situations that are coming up, it helps you to handle those situations, and we call it finding balance. The third part of the book is finding sanity and health. And the more you open your heart and release what doesn't work, your health will actually be restored, because that's what the problem was in the first place. But medicine doesn't recognize that. And finding truth in the end is we can actually ascend. If you know about alchemy, we are the pot of gold. We are the genie in the bottle. But when you ascend into that higher consciousness, that's what the fourth chapter is about. And we do actually become Christed or masters of our own life. We can make the choices that give us the results that are loving solutions, and that you master your emotions so you don't go down the tubes with your old, I'm a terrible, horrible, awful. I used to think I was a terrible, horrible, awful person, and I was going to have to live the rest of my life this way, and oh, God, help me, But we don't have to stay in that attitude anymore. We can change it, and we can be the innocent child, which has no criticism, judgment, condemnation. And we can move out of that place in our innocence. That's the love coming through us to others, being innocent like a child. And so the fourth part is about accomplishing that higher level of consciousness. And I think it's that chart for going up the vibrations that I mentioned is also in that book. So I have found ways that worked for me, and I surely, people have told me it works for them too. So if someone were interested in going to Amazon.com, my books are on Amazon.com. I have ebooks altogether. I have 10 books on there. They all are about moving into higher consciousness one way or another. I have also a book on there called Road to Success, and another one called The Real Meaning of 2012, Bringing Heaven to Earth. And that's what we're really doing. We're releasing the negative energy, and we're letting the love come into the planet. And that's how we're going to be living in the future. In my life, I've brought it in now, but gradually and more is merging in, and we're all doing this in one way or another.
So what happened in 2012? Do you believe something happened there? Something shifted?
Oh, it was a huge shift. When Jesus came in 2,000 years ago, there was a photon belt, and that was the Christ consciousness energy. And if you know anything about astrology and so forth, I'm not a master of that at all, but I understand some basics about it. And that allowed his energy to bring him into a higher loving God type consciousness. And of course, people often see him as God, and the churches promote that. Well, as the universe is evolving and whatever, that energy was not sustainable on Earth. And so we went into in history, we call it the darkness, the dark ages. And so then we started coming out of the dark ages historically. Well, at 2012, the photon belt returned, and the Christ consciousness started beaming to Earth again. And that's the energy around us and within us that we can utilize and access today to bring ourselves into that same place that Jesus brought himself. So the photon belt makes it possible for us to be supported in a loving universe again. And the people that did it without that energy, it was a real struggle. They called those the masters. And that's what a master was. They had overcome the planetary density of energy into a higher consciousness. Well, today everybody can do it if they choose to do the work.
I agree with you. 2012 was phenomenal for me, and reading the chat here live, a lot of people talking about how powerful 2012 was for them, and something happened spiritually. Definitely new levels for me in my awakening and UFO angelic contact, and been beautiful. So if you want to go ahead and plug your website before we get off here, people can go directly to your site. You got a lot of information on your website, and you have been well documenting your endeavors. There's a lot of stuff on your website. If you want to go ahead and share that link out before we go.
Okay, well, I'd love to. It's Angelica's Gifts, ANGELICAS GIFTS. Angelica is my major angel, and Angelica's Gifts is what I call all my endeavors, because I wear many hats. And so it's all focused under Angelica's Gifts, my books, my counseling, my writing, and the rest of the things that I do. So yes, it is full of information, and videos too, and articles, and a variety of things. And just click on whatever the parts of the I'm also a retired teacher. I have lots to say about education. So, whatever parts of that I'm acquainted with holistic health and whatever, you'll find it on my website. And as I said, my books are on Amazon.com. My blog, I try to keep it up to date so you know what's coming on my radio show every week. In fact, this coming week will be past lives. I'm going to do a program on past lives. MarilynRedmondBooks.blogspot.com is my blog. And of course, I have over 100 videos on YouTube. So check out, I have videos for domestic violence and all kinds of lectures about that and my books and questions like we're doing today. So a variety of things on YouTube. Check it all out. Love to hear from you. If you wanted to contact me at Marilyn@angelicasgifts.com, be sure and give me, you can email me and you have a question or a concern. And I answer a lot of questions on Quora every day, about 1,000 questions a day. People come in and read, 1,000 people a day come in and read the answers to my questions on Quora. So
Oh, wow.
You're welcome to get hold of me any way that works for you.
All right, Marilyn, I really enjoyed this conversation. We'll have to do it again soon. Thank you so much, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a joy, and have a wonderful day. And thanks to everybody out there. I hope you're having a good day too.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Marilyn Raymond, ladies and gentlemen. I enjoyed it. Sweet woman. Been through a lot. Sweet woman. Those who have been through a lot and are still going strong. Shout out, man. I love it. Strong people. Good stuff, man. Yeah, good stuff. There was a comment, we were talking about shadow beings. I've been weaving that into every other podcast here since me and Danny did ours. Shout out to Danny, he's in the chat right now. But it was Home Sauce in the chat mentioned talk to somebody who does meth, and they'll tell you all about shadow beings. You're right, man. It's weird when it comes to meth in the spirit realm. You know, I had a friend of mine, his dad cooked meth, and I really think that when it comes to what the Bible calls pharmakia, sorcery, it's the mixing and the creating and like a witch's cauldron. You know, I really think meth is a witch's cauldron. I mean, you're putting battery acid and Comet, you know, would you clean the bathtub with, all kind of crazy ingredients into some kind of substance that you're gonna put in your body. That's and it changes your brain chemistry, the way you think, man, and it makes you sensitive to the other realms. A friend of mine's dad, at some point, he's born again now, but at one point he was cooking dope, and he was just like telling his son, which is a friend of mine, that he believed that meth could be like the real way that we can talk to God, by smoking meth. And it's all this crazy talk, crazy people talk. It's definitely not a way to talk to God. You're talking to a God, all right. God's with the little G. And when you're going around seeing shadow entities hiding in the woods, and people in your closet and under the bed, and paranoid and staying up for days on end, you know, that's the thing about it. It's like the opposite of true spirituality. When you think of crystal meth, it's such a powerful drug, and it's destroying so many people's lives. You know, you're staying up for days on end. That is spiritual. Fasting because you're not eating. Like meth heads and crackheads, they're not eating. They're going days without eating, and they're fasting sleep. So therefore, when you stay up for when you stay up for elongated periods of time, you become that much more sensitive to the spirit realm, and that veil is thin. Where you're supposed to be in the dream state, when your body's supposed to rest and go into the dream state, it kind of merges because you're forfeiting sleep and you're staying awake. So your reality begins to merge with the dream, and you got people who stay up days on end. You know, they talk about like the secret agents, cops hiding in the trees outside in the woods, and the devil's coming for them, and all kind of stuff, man, on these drugs that bad stuff can happen. So crystal meth, as people seeing shadow beings or being chased by demons and crazy stuff going on that. I had a friend of mine. He's an old hippie, man, and he's born again now. He loves Jesus. It's funny to hear him share his stories about LSD and stuff back in the day. But he had a story, man, that he was in his house tripping on acid, and he was freaking out, and he had this little leprechaun demon chasing him through his house, freaking out, scared to death, and he runs in his bedroom and he slams the door, and the troll, the demon's trying to get in there to kill him. He's freaking out. He goes to get his shotgun. The handle's wiggling, the door's banging, and he's about to shoot through the door. But about that time, he grabs it, opens the door, and it was his dad. His dad was trying to get in and through the door, and he almost shot through the door and would have shot his dad. You know, so you have to be careful, man, with pharmakia and with mixing chemicals and concocting things. You know, we talk about natural substance. I'm a proponent for psilocybin, anything natural that you can just pick up in the woods and eat. You know what I'm saying? That's a whole nother story versus like mixing. Let me take this lighter apart and use some of the fluid. Let me get this, all this weird stuff and creating these crazy. You're insane. You're a crazy person. That will mess you up. Don't do that. Being hallucinations and stuff that's scary, demonic stuff. We was talking about alcohol addiction. When I was a teenager, my mom was dating this guy. His name was Emmett, and Emmett's passed on now. I wrote about him extensively in my book, and I'm thinking about just taking a bunch of chapters out of the book and just putting it online for people to read. There's some stuff that I shared that I don't want to share anymore on there because some people were hurt when they read it, because I put personal information in there for other people who weren't resolved or healed, and I talked about some things openly in my life, and wasn't good. So my mom. But I'm thinking about taking some of the chapters out and just putting it online just so you can read. And there's some chapters where I talk about Emmett. Emmett was addicted to like all kind of pills, any pain pill. He only had one leg and he had like metal rods in his back, and talk about him extensively in the book. And there's some crazy stories in there about me and Emmett. But when it comes to alcoholism, the guy, he picked me up from I was in Alabama. He was going to take me back to Louisiana where my mom was staying. So he comes to pick me up, and the dude had a gallon of vodka in his truck, and he was just sitting there chugging it. He's like telling me I can have some, and we got to drive 2.5 hours on the interstate back to Louisiana, and he's swerving all in the road and freaking out. And we're on the interstate. One point, he pulls over. We go to the store, and I got him to buy me a 40 ounce. I think I was 13 at the time. Bought me a 40 ounce of St. Ides malt liquor, and I was drinking that. But another point, he pulled over. He wanted me to drive. He's like, "I can't drive. I need you to drive, Derek." Like, man, I don't know how to drive. This was like a standard, stick shift. I can't drive that. I need you to drive. He's like, "Well, we're going to pray. Make sure we pray so we can make it back." And he grabs my hand. He's praying with me. He's like, "God, help us to get where we need to be safely." And he's still chugging this straight vodka, man. And he's on pills and stuff too. And he's like squeezing my hand so hard, man. My hand was like hurting so bad while he was praying. And we got back on the interstate. He's trying his best to keep it between the lanes. I'm scared to death, scared for my life. I don't know what to do, man. We're driving. We pass up the exit that we're supposed to get off at, and then he goes out into the median on the interstate and just goes way down this hill, comes back up the other side, and freaking out. And so finally, we were getting close. We were probably 15 miles away, and we got pulled over. He was going through a city, and we got pulled over, and cops came in there, and arrested him and was asking him about the St. Ides alcohol in the floorboard. And it's like, did you buy that for the kid? I was like, nah, that ain't mine. It's like, no, you're not drinking straight liquor and St. Ides. And man, that guy, alcohol, man, it messes people up, man, if they can't overcome it. And I've got countless stories about Emmett and my mom fighting. Some of it's in the book if some of you guys have read it, but I want to post some of that online. I'm going to post it on my website, just a couple excerpts and about Emmett and those stories with dealing with alcohol and abuse and watching him and my mama fight, fist fights. There was one time, and all this is in my book, man, but there was one time that my friend Michael was spending the night with me over at our house, and Emmett and my mom were up fighting all night. They were just throwing blows back and forth. He only had one leg. He's hobbling around the house. My mom's got him pinned down, and Michael was spending the night with me, and he's in the living room on the ground screaming for my friend, Michael, help me, Michael. And I was like, bro, go in there and help him, bro. He's calling you. He's like, I ain't going in there. I was like, man, go help him. They're doing that, and then he comes, 5 minutes later, he comes hobbling down the hallway and sticks his head in the door, and he's bleeding and stuff, and he looks at Michael and he's like, thanks a lot. No, why you didn't help him? And then I don't know, they just kept fighting, man, and something happened, and my mom threw a mason jar across the living room. That's one of the big jars that you would, like jelly and jam comes in. She threw it across the living room, hit him in the head, busted his head wide open. And he's sitting there bleeding out, man. This is insane. I'm a young teenager seeing all this stuff. He's bleeding out. And so my mom goes outside because the laundry room was outside. She goes to the dryer to get a towel to try to put it on his head. She goes outside. When she does, he locks the door, locks her out. She tries to come back in, and the door's locked. And he's sitting on the bar stool, just blood all over him. He's laughing. He said, they're going to get you for murder. I'm going to die, and they're going to get you for murder. My mom's freaking out. So my mom punches through the window of our front door and unlocks it. She's bleeding now. So she comes inside and holds it on his head to try to stop the bleeding and stuff or whatever. And one of the times when I first walked in and they were fighting, he was laying on the ground, and my mom had his fake leg in her hand, and she was trying to pull his leg off. And she was pulling it, and it got stuck at the end of his pants. So he's laying on the ground, and the leg is stuck at the end of his pants leg, and she's pulling. It looked like his leg was like 6 foot tall, because she was just like had his leg up trying to pull it off, and he was like wobbling around. So it was just insane. But there was blood everywhere. There was handprints with blood on it. I think the ambulance did come. They treated him there, and he didn't go with them. But there was blood all over the carport, blood in the kitchen, and just blood everywhere. And so the next day, my wife, Erin, which we were dating at the time, it was her first time coming over. She was going to come pick me up. So she gets in the car. She comes over there to pick me and Michael up. We're going to go to the mall or something. She walks to the door, and there's like bloody handprints all over the wall and puddles of blood at the house. And it's her first time coming over to pick me up. What an introduction, man. That was just insane. I go into more detail in the book and stuff, but I'll post it on my website, some of those stories. Really interesting stuff that I've been through. But alcohol, man, you don't have to live like that. You're talking about abuse and domestic violence and stuff like that, man. Get out of those situations, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, get out of those situations. Anybody abusive and controlling, and I've seen, and I believe in the generational curses, man. I believe that energy's transferred down, and the same type of fights that my mom has done. She's been fighting. My mom's been fighting her boyfriend since I was born, fighting dudes, beating them up and stuff. It's crazy. And look at my sister, man. My sister fights her boyfriends. I have friends, so I can look at their mom and then look at them. Every time, like, it's weird now. I have this vision when I look at women I look at their mom and I can say, okay, she's gonna be her mom when she grows up. Like this woman, and if you know their mom, they're just like younger versions of their mom. If you haven't dealt with that, um, those issues, and the people I'm talking about, we coming from broken homes, man. It's probably different if you're coming from um different lifestyle and everything's good and you're coming from a loving family, and that's your curse, right? Love, it's not a curse, it's a blessing. But it's that's what you're born into, and that's what you're shown. That's what you have there. It's what's instilled within you to share, man. I remember, just all of this stuff coming with generational curses, man. Like, um, all my granddaddy, um, my brother, everybody. Like, I've been around situations where they abused women. Like, it was normal for me to be a kid and see my granddaddy backhand my grandmother, see my brother slap his girlfriend in front of company, in front of people. The girl's crying. I've been in situations they're asking me to help them. I'm, 9 years old, 10 years old, 11. I can't do nothing. My brother's huge, and see my cousins, and they all beat their girlfriends. And they were young. It wasn't like they were old men beating their wives. These dudes was like, man, they were teenagers. They was like anywhere from like 17 to like 25 years old. I've seen it happen, beating women. And I had to catch myself, man. You know what I'm saying? I had to deal with those demons. I was gonna be following down that road. I remember, doing things I shouldn't have did. And when I was in that lifestyle, when I was into witchcraft and all of that crazy stuff, man, I was going to go down that same road. And thank God that I broke the curse, that I reversed the curse, and got into Jesus and let him change my heart and change my life. I think that's what we need to do, man. You can look at your parents, man, whether they're alcoholics or whether they're this, whether they're that, whether they're drug addicts. Look, like the dude I was talking about, I'm not gonna name the names because y'all know these people. But the guy whose dad was cooking meth, he cooked meth with his son. They bonded over cooking dope. You know what I'm saying? And then when the son's addicted to meth and addicted to dope years later, and the dad's healed and delivered, now he's in church. He don't cook dope no more. And he wonders why his son can't do right. Why you can't do right, son? Why you running around doing dope? You taught me this. You taught me this stuff. You brought me up in this. That's a generational curse. And that father, the son, when you mixing chemicals and there's chemical reactions and stuff, that they had a situation where the meth lab blew up, and he seen his dad's hand go flying off. Dad blew off his hand in front of the son cooking dope. And his dad to this day only has one hand. It's a reminder. Every day you can lose your hand cooking dope, and the son seen it happen. He's a little kid, and that's all he knew. That was normal for them. Crazy, man. I believe in generational curses. I can see them. We can rid them. Take it to God in prayer, renounce it, deal with the hurt, deal with the stress, deal with the trauma. Nip it in the bud, man, because you're gonna, those who, and essentially comes down to those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. It's just a cycle. We talk about being on default. We talk about being on autopilot. Same thing. You're on autopilot. You're just doing what you know to do. You just pass down. You don't even know it. You think you're original. You think you're unique. You think you're an individual. You're a spitting image of your father. Spitting image of your father. That's why we've adopted into a new family. Our father's good. I have a good father. Now we're resembling this father. Now we're taking on his character traits. The good stuff. It's deep, man. I hope this resonated with some of you guys. I really enjoyed this conversation. A lot of good nuggets in there. A lot of good stuff that you can apply to your life. And, don't don't think it, like I said, I'll have to kind of give the disclaimer sometimes or whatever, but don't think that just because I have a guest on that I'm like with them and everything that they believe. I try to find the gems. I think everybody has something that they can bring to the table. I think that a broken clock is right twice a day, and everybody has something that they can bring to the table. I don't think anybody knows it all. I don't think that anybody is walking in 100% truth or walking in, you know, I don't think that anybody has it all together, especially when there's so much, there's so many more topics and stuff that interest me. And there's like not one preacher, there's not one guru, there's not one musician or whatever who has done the homework or has done the studying and is well-rounded enough to be like your only teacher. God speaks to us through everything and everyone. God speaks to us through everything and everyone. Nature, you know, the donkey, you know what I'm saying? Balaam, God speaking through the writing on the wall. He's speaking through the donkeys in scripture. Whatever, if you're listening, God will speak to you. He's speaking to us through one another. So with that, I'm going to say peace and shalom. Thank you guys for supporting my work. And we'll do it again very soon. Head on over to patreon.com/TruthSeekah to support. I appreciate you guys. Shalom, shalom. Peace.
Your way so much higher than mine, so much higher than mine. Your so much deeper than mine, so much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.